People in Minneapolis have endured months of intense physical and emotional trauma following Operation Metro Surge, where over 3,000 ICE agents occupied the state of Minnesota. As protests continue and people speak out, many families are still afraid to leave their homes or go to work, creating a huge economic decline, which could affect communities for years. The parallels to a dark time in history are being made. And my next guest has written a book about what his family went through after fleeing Nazi Germany. Joining me on Life Unscripted is Stephen E. Meyer, and he is an author. It is so nice to have you here, and a psychologist. And your memoir, it is called My Father Against the Nazis. This is a personal story of intergenerational trauma, which we certainly are experiencing here. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you.
People in the Twin Cities have undergone immense pressure and anxiety and depression, considering we've had, thousands of ICE members in the streets. And this could last for years. It could last for decades. It could be generational. So as a psychologist, if you can, how would you tell people to better take care of themselves and to kind of move on and cope while this long-term struggle of protecting human rights may last for generations to come?
Well, knowing that it can last a long time makes it both easier and harder. And who knows how long it'll last. That might be the hardest part. One phrase you used in the introduction was being afraid to leave your home. That is a very big deal. Can you imagine every time you approach the door or think of an errand or a place to go, being afraid actually to go outside and do what you normally do? That is a prospect that fortunately some of us don't face, and unfortunately many do. And it's difficult to learn how to get around that. Right now we're going through a phase of having food delivered and having children escorted, and I don't know how long that can last.
One great thing about all of this kind of trauma that the community has been facing in Minneapolis and St. Paul and all across the state is seeing people come together to help each other, and through deliveries of food, and we see people are speaking out, they're carrying whistles, and their voices are being heard, and I think that's really important. I heard a quote yesterday by Ken Burns, and I think this is important. I felt that having you on this podcast with the perspective of the past, Nazi Germany, but also what's happening here today and those parallels. He said the best way to commemorate, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of our country, Americans understanding that democracy and self-governance requires our constant attention. We've taken it for granted, haven't we?
We do, and yet if we read the newspaper or the more contemporary equivalents, we're really aware of how democracy is under threat, and it is a major issue through overreach and by permission, seemingly, by Congress and the courts. So far, there is this overreach, and in which constitutional powers are being taken.
You have written a lot about personal trauma and collective trauma. You refer to this as the wounds of memory. Can you explain what that means exactly?
Well, I often get asked why or how I wrote this book, and when the idea came to me, and I'm sort of moved to say I think it began at birth. In utero, perhaps, because trauma does get passed on, the stresses that parents feel, the mother in particular, from the world around, somehow forms part of that cocktail that enters the child's bloodstream and is processed there. And there's the home I grew up in was a grieving household, actually, and a silent household. And of course, I didn't know enough to even sense that, or certainly not put words on it, but I picked up on it.
And there are chemical changes to our bodies as well when we're experiencing trauma.
They say so, and native traditions of medicine and Asian traditions say that grief is carried in the lungs. And sure enough, I have a diagnosis of COPD that I've had since childhood.
So, if you can, how do we recognize the signs of authoritarianism, the parallels between the far right and Germany? Because we've been hearing that word a lot.
Yes, and the parallels in Germany usually means the 1930s, and usually within that, which is 10 years, but 1933 was the pivotal moment, and that's when Hitler grabbed the crown, not the crown literally, but the dictatorship. No one had done that before, and asserted that all powers were his. I mean, he got the parliament, the Reichstag, to approve of this plan in which he would be above everything, above the legislature, not next to it like we have, above the judiciary, not next to it like we have. We have those three branches. They had that too in the Weimar period, that 15-year period of constitutional democracy. But Hitler was determined to erase those and give all powers to himself, and he strong-armed people and skullduggery behind the scenes, and eventually he had enough power as the head of the party, the Nazi party, and therefore entitled to more seats in the parliament. But he managed to get the official leadership to make him dictator. And then executive decrees rolled out of Berlin that limited the rights of people, that stripped them of their rights, eventually their property, eventually their ability to stay in the country, eventually all their assets, eventually their right to, well, even at the very beginning, the right to earn a living. That happened immediately. So there was a formal program of discrimination, legal discrimination now, because he was the law, discrimination against not just Jews, but Roma or Gypsies, blacks, people that he said were enemies of the racialized state.
People who were less than.
Less than what we now say people of color, but also gay people, also single-parent households, also poor people, also handicapped people, mentally disabled people, all sorts of people who don't fit his idea of the white supremacist state.
So you live part-time in Amsterdam.
I do now, yes.
But you happened to be here when the ICE raids,
Yes.
when they started to occupy the state of Minnesota. And you told me that you felt honored to be here. Explain what you mean by that.
The reaction to ICE occupation was rapid and noticeable and covered in the news and covered with great with pride and animosity by elected officials. Mayor Fry's "get the F out of Minneapolis" was a resounding call for people to recognize that this was an illegal, unauthorized, inhuman way for the elected government to act.
Right.
I was proud of the way we the people, rose up. It's been called a rising. There's a new book, Ice Out, Minnesota writers rising up. It's the thought of writers rising up is a sort of a glorious, glorious theme. And
what's different now is people have cell phones. A lot of this is recorded, and we've been able to see with our own eyes what has been happening. Like, for instance, the conditions at the Whipple building, that has not been open to us to see, but plenty of other things happening on the streets.
The courage of people on the streets has just been amazing. In the coldest days of a Minnesota winter, people huddled up, bundled up layers. We know what it all looks like. I got to say to people who were coming into my grocery store, "Thank you for your service." And that was, I meant that. I felt allied with, I'm too old for pepper spray, but I felt very proud and honored to be part of that scene.
I did too. My daughter was one of those who was in
Good.
those 0 degree
Good.
days and was pepper sprayed. And I felt really proud to know that she was out there. It's very hard to see the city, what has been happening. I've found it, like many people, just it's hard to even explain. It's been very emotional. And being someone who is not of color, I can't imagine what it would be like to feel like you can't go to work, the kids are not in school.
My parents faced the very same thing. They had to withdraw from public life under serious penalty. My father had just finished law school when Hitler came to full power. It was almost the same day. There was a celebration party toasting his success and his getting admitted to the bar and having this nice robe, judicial robes he could use in court. The next day, the decree came out. Jews could not practice law before the bar, could not be part of the civil service, could not be part of the professions, not just law, but medicine and teaching, professorial stuff. They were canceled in today's vocabulary. And with that comes the question, what's going to happen next? And next always brought more oppression for several years, from 1933 until 1939, which is 6 years, constant pressure, such that there were very few Jews left living in Germany at that point, and war began at that point. And my parents had just escaped to England and then to the U.S., but they had lived those 6 years. Everyone else these days, with the benefit of hindsight, say, why did you stay so long? And they said, well, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. We're hopeful. This can't last. This won't last. There's already been attempts on Hitler's life. Not everyone was for him, but more and more people were, because he suppressed dissent. He took control of the newspapers. He took control of all the media. He took control of the libraries and the museums and all the things where, in our country now, we have the opportunity to school ourselves in ways that don't fit the paradigm coming out of Washington. But you know very well that they're working to squelch those.
Yeah, we see it.
We see it.
Pretty much daily. I want to hear more about your relationship with your father in a minute, but we are going to take a short break from Life Unscripted, and we'll be right back. Hey, I want to tell you about a product that I absolutely love. They are my Cozy Earth pajamas. They are just soft and buttery, and I can't tell you, I would actually prefer to wear them all day long. Now, I've arranged a fantastic discount for my listeners of Life Unscripted. Enter promo code AKLIFE for 21% off any product you purchase at Cozy Earth. Once again, that's 21% off. Go to CozyEarth.com and use promo code AKLIFE, and let's get cozy. Have you ever gotten up from a great night's sleep, but then you look over at your pillowcase and you're like, ew, what's on there? Well, I have the perfect solution and a great gift for the holidays. They're called Copper North pillowcases. And what makes these unique is these are copper-infused silk pillowcases, which means they're antibacterial. They'll keep your pillowcase cleaner. Also, your skin will be glowing more and your hair less frizzy, less breakouts. They're great gift ideas. And this is what's perfect. They're also machine washable. So I've arranged a 15% discount for my listeners. Just use the promo code. You can find it in my show notes. Click on that link and you will see the Copper North pillowcases. We're back again, speaking with Stephen E. Meyer, and your book, My Father Against the Nazis. It's a very personal memoir about the relationship with your father and what he endured in the 1930s in Germany. So he lost a lot. He lost his job as an attorney, his homeland. This had an incredible effect, not a great one, I'm sure, on the family. Describe your relationship with him.
Well, most of my memory of my father in the earliest years, well, up through adolescence practically, is of him. He'd come home from his day job in downtown Washington, D.C., where we lived in those years. He had a job with the U.S. government as an economist with the Department of Commerce. He'd come home, have dinner, and then retreat to his little room where he'd work on his typewriter, cigarette smoke swirling, and a glass of scotch, and maybe a cigar, certainly a cigarette, and working on legal briefs that he was able to file against the German government to make amends for all that had been taken and get some money back. But so he was occupied with that in his head, at the typewriter, not at the typewriter, but in his head, sort of fighting the legal, creating the legal arguments for restitution. And he was good at that, but it took quite a toll. And one of which was he just absented himself from family life an awful lot. And that was hard on me. And it took a long time to come to understand what he was going through. Actually, it took a very long time.
Do you think that he held back a lot in telling you, because we hear that story quite a bit, that he didn't want to go into detail about what had happened to him and to his family and to your grandparents?
But one day at breakfast, I was moved to ask him, so what happened to your parents? Tell me what happened during the war, because I don't know. You've told me really almost nothing. And he looked up, and you know that painting by Edvard Munch, the scream, the silent scream of horror? He looked like that. And that's what he showed me. It was silent. Somehow it was tearful, but it was silent, and it was shock, and it was gut-wrenching. And then my mother gave me a short answer.
He was unable to verbalize that.
He was unable. And there was another occasion where he was moved to tears, but not to words. And that was life with my father, really.
So he never really recovered, it sounds like.
Well, that's a good way to put it. It was kind of a PTSD kind of thing. It wasn't all completely, totally like that. He had a sense of humor that he could bring out from time to time, and he knew how to relax from time to time, and he loved to take us out to dinner and stuff like that. He and my mother went on vacation, so it wasn't always like that. But I carried a kind of a burden of all that. I was angry at what they did to my father. I was angry. In fact, the first title of this book, the working title, all the way through, almost to the end, was My Father Against the Effing Nazis. Effing spelled out. Yeah. And the publisher said, no, we can't do that. But as the current times began to resemble those times of the 30s, even the publisher was saying, well, maybe we can go there. We might have to put an asterisk in there. But I began to realize that anger was mostly mine. I never heard my father say the effing Nazis.
But it's the intergenerational trauma that he had, that just, that you felt.
I got the pain and the anger. He got the pain of recognizing that while he loved Germany, and he did not want to leave. He did not want to leave. While he loved Germany, Germany did not love him back. And that was the big pain. And that relates to the current scene here on the street, too. Being called garbage. Come on. Yeah. Being called unwanted. Being called uncontributing from S-hole countries.
Being told that these are the quote-unquote worst of the worst. And meanwhile, we can clearly see that they're just grabbing people who don't.
One's dignity is probably the most precious asset a human being has. And people like Hitler, people like Trump, don't know how to spell dignity, how to say dignity, how to show dignity, how to understand it as a basic element of human life.
Right.
It is human right number one, and is to be able to hold on to one's dignity. Anyone who has experienced a less than privileged life knows what it's like to be without dignity and knows what it's like to have others lord it over. It's an old expression, lord it over you for not being of the right whatever.
When some people hear the word Nazi in the comparison that we're seeing and reading about more often these days because of what's happening, they think, that's kind of a harsh term. That's the reaction I've seen from other people.
Yeah.
What do you think when people say that?
Well, it is a harsh term because God didn't mean people to grow up to become Nazis. That being a Nazi is the least godly or Christian or any faith thing. Being a Nazi is inhuman. It's an inhuman thing. And when I hear people say, "Oh, they weren't so bad," well, you don't understand what it really means.
Yeah.
So, but I do understand that there's a temptation to use that word on anybody who is, rude or worse, cruel.
Do you think we shouldn't be using that word in describing what's going on right now?
I've never used it on anybody, and because it doesn't usually hold up, but it's tempting. I've been tempted, but it's. A real Nazi is not. It's a full-time job of full-time arrogance and full-time cruelty. And cruelty, I think, it is the MO. I don't know who's been saying cruelty is the point. And I've been saying, I've picked up on that expression to explain why would they do that? Well, cruelty is the point. And cruelty is un-American in the extreme, although we have certainly a history of it, but it's not what Americans like to think we are,
We're seeing a lot of symbolism out there, too, that is connected to that time of Germany. We're going to continue our conversation, but we'll be back in a minute on Life Unscripted. It's that time of year where the air is dry, our skin is dry, and we need hydration. We need a facial in a bottle, and you can find that at Love Indus. Also, they have a serum that is beautiful, Botox in a tube. These products will nourish and they'll plump your skin. They are fantastic, and I have a deal for you. In fact, you can get 21% off of all the products at loveindus.com. That's where you can find them. Also, look on my show notes and click on the link for 21% off for great skincare with Love Indus. You wrote that you were estranged, essentially, from your father, but you don't really like to talk about it. Why?
Well, being estranged is no fun, and
did you try and reach out to your father? Was he just
not much?
Not much.
Our relationship improved immediately after he died. And because I didn't have the weight of, how to do this. And I was going to Europe quite frequently. I went to Paris a lot in those days. And that was also the city where my father and mother met. And I sort of found him on my shoulder saying, "Oh, let's go see the tennis finals at Roland Garros, or let's go have a drink at the hotel where the Nazis were garrisoned and have it and toast our good luck or something." Anyway, he sort of crept into post-mortem conversations, and I got to understand him a little more. I got to sympathize with him a little. I sat in the park where he used to live when he lived with before he met my mother, and just sort of imagined. And so I was able to equalize the relationship a little more. And somehow the story of my father even though I didn't hear it from him directly, I began to learn more about. He was a lawyer. He kept all the paperwork. He kept all the papers, all the journals, all the correspondence that he had with his parents when they were still living in Cologne, and my parents had fled. Yeah. They made my parents leave, but they corresponded until Pearl Harbor. All of that correspondence. And then my mother and so then my father signed up with the U.S. Army and became part of the intelligence corps with the Ritchie Boys, which is a famed group that interrogated captured German officers. And so I'm riffling through all this correspondence, scanning it, sending it off to a museum in New York, the Leo Baeck Institute, scanning it. And I knew there was some writing to be done.
Right. I can't imagine coming across it, though, and this happened after he passed. And what it would have been like to find that before then, to actually talk to him about it. I mean, there it was in writing, but to actually have him talk about it from his heart and out of his mouth.
I wasn't able to, and he wasn't able to. It's a kind of like PTSD, like you said.
I'm sure that's hard. And you wrote this book. I mean, it is a cautionary tale, but you did not intend to write it for that reason.
Correct.
What was the reason?
When I got the boxes of papers, my mother curated it down from 8 filing cabinets. And I got them. And I would look through them and scan them. And one of the key things that came up out of there was a picture of my great-great-grandfather, Meyer, same last name, Samuel Meyer, rabbi of Hechingen, small town. I looked it up, and I couldn't believe what I saw. It's a real synagogue. It doesn't have real people in it anymore. No Jews have been in there for decades. But it's a memorial funded by the federal government. And he was a very prominent rabbi in the Reform tradition, mid-19th century. And then he went to law school and studied what we would call human rights law or civil rights law or something like that. And he was, this is interesting because this began to track my professional career as a psychologist working with social justice organizations and community development organizations and all this. And he kind of became the hero of my story and became the hero of that picture. I remember that picture hanging on my father's wall. I grew up with it, but here it comes back at me, and I think, let's connect these dots. So Samuel had a son, had Paul. And I wrote to the synagogue. I introduced myself. I'm Stephen, son of Paul, son of Ernst. Very Old Testament-like. And they said, well, we've wondered we didn't know anything about you. Please come and visit. And so we did. We were living in Amsterdam. Susan, my wife, and I drove there and they rolled out the red carpet. And I mean, there I am, the great-grandson of this guy. And so that sort of anchors the story. And I realized that my father learned a lot from him too, not in real life, but through storytelling in the family. It's not only trauma that gets passed on, it's also
a lot of history.
Also a lot of history. Families love to talk up what's right with their families when there are such things to talk up, and so there was enough that allowed me to embrace those different bits of story and connect them together.
I want to talk about your work as a psychologist in a minute. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Do you ever have an energy drink and you realize, oh, that's a little bit too much caffeine? Well, here's an idea for you. Aspire. Aspire energy drinks are so yummy. In fact, this one is mango lemonade, and it's delicious. Half the caffeine, and it also has green tea, a lot of great flavors, and I've arranged a great listener discount for you, 20% off if you use the promo code AKLIFE. So 20% off of these Aspire drinks at aspiredrinks.com. You will love feeling inspired with Aspire. You know, one way to elevate your look is by a pair of great eyeglasses. And I have a lot of them. I have prescription eyeglasses. I have sunglasses. Why? Well, because I need to see, and also to protect my eyes from the bright sunshine. And I have found some very stylish eyewear from Aquila. Here they have eco-friendly frames, so many different colors. We've got classic black, and they are affordable. They're made in LA, but they're not just for movie stars. And I have a great deal for you, for all of my listeners. Just use the promo code AKLIFE, and you will get 10% off. 10% off of any of the frames there at aquila.la. You can also find the deal on my show notes. Just click on that link, and you get 10% off of Aquila eyewear. So it was nice to see some positivity, some hope in your book. And one of those little nuggets was you feel like America has more resources and talent for resistance than Germany.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we've been at this longer. Germany, when they were overcome by Nazism, they had only 15 years of experience with democracy. Not many people liked it, even though it was a good constitution, a very progressive one for the time. But we are used to having a constitution. We grow up with it in our schools. Our parents grew up, our grandparents grew up with it in schools. Civics education was a fundamental part of public education in this country, and we're steeped in checks and balances and the role, and so we all grew up with that. I don't know they teach that anymore. It'd be a shame. Could explain a lot of what's going on.
I think there's less of that, and certainly fewer history books.
That's right. And the other thing that's hugely different is Germany is very steeped in formal authority, especially military authority. They've had armies since armies were invented, and they were very good at it, and discipline and the best technology and that discipline and technology. I mean, you can destroy a lot of the world with those, and they have, and could happen again.
Freedom of speech is, something that we hold
That's right.
Closely, although it is being continually squashed.
But it's a big part of speaking truth to power and authority, right. And we relish those rights, and that was not really known in Germany at that time. So those are two big things: respect for democracy, respect for autonomy, don't tread on me, our freedoms, our liberty, all those things that are in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution and in the worlds of community life, community development. Those are things that didn't really exist in Germany, hardly at all. And and that's a part of what we saw in Minneapolis on the streets, but it's throughout this country.
You are a psychologist, but you were explaining that, not a clinical psychologist.
Correct.
Explain. Now, I know that you founded the Rainbow Research,
right.
Which is a nonprofit organization.
Yes.
What is it that you do with that organization? How, being a psychologist, how is this different?
Yeah. Well, it's the kind of psychology I studied was originally called industrial and organizational psychology. And the University of Minnesota was and is very big in that field. And I came to Minneapolis to go to graduate school in the psychology department and had a good time with it and did well with it. And I thought I'd be a professor, tried my hand at it for a couple of years and decided I didn't really have anything to profess.
I don't know that I think your book would say otherwise.
Well, it took a while to find it. That's part of the point. And so I left academia after 2 years, came back here to start up this Rainbow Research thing. Some of your viewers might remember the Rainbow Cafe, which was kind of inspired
the
Uptown?
Name
in a way, in Uptown.
Yeah,
and,
Lake and Hennepin.
Yeah, I didn't settle there. I was around the corner from that, and the name was inspired because I didn't want to be control data, which existed then too.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it was all about assisting, see if I can remember the mission statement, assisting socially concerned organizations in becoming more effective in their responses to social problems and social opportunities. So it was about nonprofit organizations and foundations. And I spent my whole career working with nonprofits and foundations here in the Twin Cities and in the state, and then nationally with community foundations. I must have visited 200 of them around the country, and then I got to work in Europe a little bit too. So I really saw street level organizational level efforts to make the world a better place. And in fact, the book before this, after I finished my professionalized consulting and I taught for a few years online during COVID, I wrote a book called How to Save the World. Not too ambitious.
Just slightly.
And
where do you start and where do you end there?
Yeah, where do you end? And it's a small book. It's not for professionals. It's for people like you and you and you and you and you who get asked every day through email or whatever to send $25 to save the world. But you have to make choices because your supply of $25 checks is limited, and you have to make choices. And so the book is about coaching people on how to separate the wheat from the chaff and how to follow your own value system and how to tell if an organization has the muscle and durability and smarts to make progress on its mission, which is sort of the bottom line of a nonprofit.
That's a good mission. I think
mission.
It's a really important one today, as it was when you wrote the book, and we need more people to, have that in their brains on a 24/7 basis, and
Indeed.
It's so important right now.
We could save the world if everyone buys that book and follows, not this one. And in fact, I dedicated that book to my father, who told me more than once that the last thing he wanted from me is to become one of those save the world types.
Well,
sorry,
Dad. You proved him wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen Meyer, it is a pleasure meeting you, and your book is wonderful, and I think it just adds a lot of perspective to what's happening here now in Minneapolis and really across the state and across the country, and it's important to stay involved and to speak up.
That's right. Thank you very much. I appreciated being here. You asked good questions, and I hope I was up to it.
You're great. Hey, thanks for listening to Life Unscripted. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and write me a review. Let me know what you think of the podcast. And when you buy any of the products and use my promo code AKLIFE, I get paid. And you help support the podcast.